Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. I'm Jamil Andolini. I'm the Regional Director of Politico in Europe, and it's such a pleasure to be here in the rainforest in Belém in Brazil with you all. Before we begin, I'd really like to thank Bayer and Bill Anderson, CEO, Chief Sustainability Officer of Bayer. I'd like to thank Bayer for welcoming us to Casa Bayer in this beautiful old mansion in the rainforest in Belém, in Brazil. We're so happy to be part of the program, to be partners with Bayer in this incredible place. The eyes of the world are on Brazil this week as we're looking to see what comes out of COP30. We've got some major challenges. We shouldn't ignore the challenges. It looks like the world is definitely going to exceed the 1.5 degrees warming threshold that we originally, as a humanity, were hoping to avoid. 2024 was the hottest year on record, and we obviously have growing geopolitical challenges, let's say, and we can maybe talk about those a little bit later as well. So to help us unpack all of this, Bayer's CEO, Bill Anderson, is with me here today. You're not only, as I've mentioned, you're not only the CEO, but you're also the Chief Sustainability Officer. You're really working yourself very directly on these topics of sustainability, and you've really taken the lead inside the company and across the world in this. We're going to talk about quite a few things, but before we dive into why we're all here in the rainforest, I'd love you to tell us a little bit about this building and maybe a little bit about Casa Bayer and a bit about what your plan is for this space that we're in, this beautiful space that we're in.
Oh, sure. Thanks, Jamil, and thanks all of you for being here. About Casa Bayer, so we had to decide, what was the best way to participate in COP30, and this is a really amazing city that is right on the edge of the Amazon, in the midst of the rainforest. But there weren't so many facilities available, and we, the standard thing on offer would be to buy some sort of modern build out. There even, for some of the COPs, there have been like prefab buildings and things.
Riverboats.
Yeah. But we had an opportunity in this case. We found this old, kind of glorious old house that was built in 1925, I understand. But it needed some tender loving care. And we decided, hey, we're going to renovate the house. I think that was actually a cost-effective solution. We upgraded the electrical system and everything. But when we're done, we're gonna basically leave the house much better than we found it, and leave it to the people of Belém for use as a cultural center and a resource to the community.
That's so cool. Yeah, it's really, you can't see it on the live stream, but it's really a beautiful old mansion. It's really charming. So tell us, Bill, what you think is so important this year about COP30. Why have you turned up in such a big way as Bayer, and what is it that this one means? This is the 30th one, obviously, and so what is the significance?
Well, I'm an engineer, and I don't get excited about three-letter acronyms and all the kind of fancy talk about sustainability. For me, and I think this kind of embodies the spirit that we have at Bayer. This needs to be really practical things that impact ordinary people, right? If we want to do something about, for example, the disappearing rainforests, or we want to do something about climate change, then we have to do it through common sense products that are, represent good choices for ordinary people. So we're doing that, for example, through our agriculture division, our crop science division, things like seeds that can produce higher yields with less water, less chemicals, less land. That's the kind of sustainability that we think the world needs. It's not talk. In fact, right now we have in the fields in several places around the world something called short stature corn. So this is a corn that is identical to regular field corn, except that the plants, instead of growing 3 meters or more, they grow to about 2 meters in height. And that has substantial advantages because, one, for severe weather events, which are becoming increasingly common at harvest time, for example, they can blow down a whole cornfield. Farmers can lose 50 to 70% of their crop due to a late severe weather event. Our short stature corn is much more resistant to these kinds of effects. But perhaps even more significantly, it can be planted more densely. And so we're seeing yield gains of 30 to 40%. Now, if you want to, for example, stop clearing forests to make room for food, this is exactly what you need, right? More food from less land. And
also, I mean, one of the big topics here at COP30 is definitely to be about adaptability as well as like mitigation. It's also about adaptability, and what you're talking about there is exactly the sort of thing that's needed. As more severe weather events come, you need crops that are resistant to that kind of effects of climate change, right?
Exactly. It's adaptability and mitigation in the same product.
Very good.
And it's good for farmers because they can basically grow more crop on their given piece of land.
So I'm a cynical journalist. A bit. You're a cynical, maybe
I'm
idealistic
an
engineer.
I'm an engineer,
and I'm a cynical journalist. So I'm with you on the 3-letter acronyms and all this stuff. But you arrived. I think you and I both arrived a couple of days or a day or two ago. Can you tell me about your staff? Told me you went a little off track today. So maybe you could tell me a bit about what you saw today.
So I went to the agri-zone that's been developed by Embrapa. Embrapa is the Brazilian agency that has been driving a lot of the science in agriculture that has allowed Brazil to go from being a net food importer to now feeding their own citizens plus many other countries. And it was great to see. And by the way, that's been a partnership with Bayer on a number of seed technologies. In fact, at the AgriZone, I hope a lot of visitors to COP this year will make it to the AgriZone because it's incredible. There's all kinds of test fields showing basically modern agriculture techniques and technologies for these very things we're describing. So from reforestation to how basically more environmentally friendly planting practices, crop rotations, cover crops, all kinds of ways to put more carbon in the soil, less carbon in the air.
And what's your feeling? There's been some people who say, "Oh, why would you hold it in a place like the Amazon? Because it's hard to get here, and there's all these people descending on this place." But do you sort of certainly now I've arrived here, I totally get it. There's something different from sitting in a conference room and kind of talking about climate change, and something very different when you can come and feel it and see it in the actual rainforest. Do you agree with that? Or?
Yeah, I think also it brings the human element in because you can see the communities that are living in the rainforest areas, and they have choices they have to make. These are not wealthy communities, and if you have people in poverty and they have to choose between, let's say, clearing the rainforest and remaining in poverty, that's not a great choice. So it puts a focus on a range of efforts that are needed to create good alternatives for the residents of the rainforests and the rainforest countries. And I'm optimistic of what we can do. We signed a letter of intent today with Honduras and Suriname, in partnership with Deutsche Bank and Siemens, and this is about developing more robust carbon markets. That's important. Just to extrapolate that a little, that's important because, for example, we have millions of farmers around the world who have ways of putting more carbon in the ground and less in the atmosphere, but there's no actual incentive to do that today. So we need to make sure that the incentive structures align with those practices, and we have to do this step by step.
So looking ahead the next few days, we've had the world leaders coming in the last yesterday and today, and next week sort of COP30 really gets off the ground. What are you expecting from this meeting? Do you think we'll see what are the sorts of decisions or actions we might see in the next week or so?
I mean, I'm not a political analyst, and I think you've got some other guests here today who can maybe give you some more insights into what kinds of agreements will be forged. We focus on the things that we can affect, we can deliver. At Bayer, for example, we hope more attention is drawn to the important opportunities in agriculture. About 29% of greenhouse gas emissions are coming from agriculture. You can't really address the big picture on emissions if you don't address agriculture. And there's a lot of things that can be done. In some cases, they need some help getting over the line. But I'll give you two more examples that I think just highlight the really exciting opportunities. So we have direct seeded rice that we are working with a number of countries. This is particularly more in Asia, but this is a rice technology that can dramatically reduce the methane emissions from rice production. Rice is actually one of the biggest sources of methane in the world, and rice production alone, tackling that, we can probably save about 40% of those methane emissions.
And it's very water intensive.
Yeah, it's also very water intensive, and so our direct seeded rice is about 40% less water, 40% less methane, and quite a bit less labor as well. Another thing we're doing right now, this week in Latin America, actually first places in the world to be launched a new insecticide to address some really tricky bugs that are prevalent in Latin America. This new insecticide, it's a brand new molecule. The dose is 6 grams per hectare. For people who think in acres, it's about 2.5 grams. Imagine how you spread that little, but it's these sorts of things. Less chemicals, less water, more food on less land. That's what it's all about for us.
Maybe could you tell me just a little bit about Brazil in your global empire? As a big global company, Brazil is quite important for you as a company.
Well, I don't think anyone could accuse us of having an empire, but we do have quite an amazing network of people operating in more than 100 countries, and Brazil is hugely important, particularly in agriculture. This is, I think a lot of people don't always know where their food comes from. They think their food comes from the grocery store, but if you trace back, in a lot of parts in the world, key element of the food chain, it starts in Brazil, and especially for animal food, and so we've been a pioneer, an early pioneer. There was land that was basically thought of as wasteland in Brazil because of its high acidity, because of its low water, that people thought, oh, this can't be used for farming, and it turns out with some soil adjustments and creation of some better bred seeds that put their roots deeper, that this could be amazing land, particularly for soybean farming. And so Bayer's been a core part of that, and we look forward to continuing the great partnership in Brazil.
So obviously, you're not just on the agri-food crop science side. You also have a big health business, obviously. And what are you doing that's perhaps tackling some of the effects of climate change when it comes to health? Is that also something you're focused on?
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy. Um, you know, animals, people, we were designed to operate in a relatively narrow temperature range, and we don't do very well when temperatures exceed that. By the way, plants are the same. Plants, they need sun to grow, but they have an optimal zone, and when the temperature gets above a certain level, they stop growing. And then obviously, if the temperature continues to rise, they die. So, but we're working on this from all angles. We're doing a lot of pioneering work in cardiovascular disease. That's certainly on the rise around the world, and so many different efforts. Another one we're doing with our consumer health division, we realize that the kind of consumer health solutions that people in England, in Europe, in America take for granted, they're often not available for the majority of people in the world. And so we have a big effort right now to actually get to 1 billion people that we're serving every year. Right now we're a bit over 600 million, but we want to make sure that many more people have access to the same kind of health, I guess I would say health conveniences that we think of, but they're not conveniences if you don't have access. And the lack of them can be a very dark situation.
Bill, thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure again, as always. Thank you, and we'll catch up later, I'm sure.
Great. Thanks, Jamil.
Thanks, Bill. Now I'd like to invite Rachel Kite, who is the UK's Special Representative for Climate and the lead negotiator for the... No, okay, sorry. I've been misinformed. There's your microphone, if you... Yeah.
Just the UK representative.
Just the UK representative. Wow. It's already very exalted.
There's a whole team of expert negotiators.
Okay, good. But already an exalted title. But thank you so much for joining us.
Lovely to be here, thank you.
Coming all the way from the UK. And now we're going to have a conversation. We're going to talk about this COP30. How many COPs have you been to now?
19, and
19, wow.
Somebody told me, a journalist who obviously has time on planes to add this all up, told me today that if you've done 19, that's a year of your life.
A year of your life at
yeah,
COPs?
so I'm still in shock.
Man, which is your favourite COP?
No, you can't. Don't do that. No.
You can't do that. You can't. Yeah.
I'll
It's
upset
like asking
somebody.
what
Yeah, it's like, who's your favourite child?
Favorite child,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Sophie's choice. Sorry.
Belém. There you go.
Belém, there you go. Whichever one you're at now.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us, what are you expecting over the next week? What are the sort of pain points, agreement points? What do you think this one will be known as? Let's say we're looking back in 2 or 3 weeks. What will be the headlines? What will be people saying about Belém COP30?
So just to put my comments in context, so I've been to 19 COPs, but I've been to 19 COPs as an activist, as a UN official, senior UN official, senior World Bank Group official, now with the UK academic, so I've seen it from all sides, right? Inside the room, outside the room, on the streets. Well, I think that, so for the public at large, I hope that this is in large part the nature COP. You just heard from Bayer. If we don't protect the nature that we have intact, it's just going to affect your food basket everywhere in the world. It's going to affect so much of what we take for granted. It is the resilience upon which we depend. It is the thermostat. It is the sequestration of carbon. It is the protection of the watersheds. And finding ways to invest in that nature is something which is front and centre here. So I'll come back to that. The second thing I think is that what the Brazilians are really trying very hard to do, and it's hard, and we should be grateful to them, is to pivot away from sort of negotiating what we all think we need to do. We've kind of done that for the last 10 years, to And how do we accelerate the implementation of all of the things that we've agreed to do? And that requires a different kind of structure of conversation, because it's not negotiators sitting in airless, windowless rooms over the fine points, the commas and the brackets and all of that kind of thing around language. It is eyeball to eyeball, leader to leader, CEO to CEO, civil society leader, indigenous leader, saying, okay, we promised that we were going to do this, how are we going to do it? That's more difficult to convey to the public, but that's what we're all doing here.
So it's the action COP, not the blah blah COP.
Lula calls it the truth COP, which I think is actually right, because we've promised to do lots of things.
Moment of truth.
Yeah, we've committed to do lots of things, so now is like, are we going to do them or not? This is the moment to start doubling down and accelerating the implementation.
And as I mentioned in my conversation with Bill, there's been some criticism of putting this COP in the rainforest. What do you think of that? Do you think it was a good idea, smart idea? What's your sense?
Well, to be fair to President Lula, he said it would be in Belém, in Sharm el-Sheikh, before he'd come back into power. And he has a very specific reason for bringing us all here, which is like, this is where it starts and ends. If we don't protect this, we are all in a very, very bad situation. And you can argue that, okay, well, the air miles flown. But I think unless you've been here, unless you can see it, because I think often in the global north, we think about the Amazon and we think trees, right? You've got to look underneath the trees. You've got to look at the 18 million people that live in the legal Amazon. You've got to look at what their conditions are, what their aspirations are. This is a living ecosystem. This is a living society. And if we don't protect places like this for all of us, then really I don't know what we're doing. So, did it take some people 32 hours to get here? Yeah, fine. 32 hours of your life to try to get a better outcome, I think it's worth it. There you go. Might be the first and last round of applause I get this one.
So right now we're in the Leaders Summit before we even get the sort of formal negotiations and truth moments. When we look at some of the promises that countries have made, it looks like we're talking about only 10% emissions reduction by 2035, when the sort of demands are for 60%. What do you think about that gap? Do you think countries are going to come a bit late and close that gap, or what's your feeling about where we're at in terms of like actual promises, actual reduction of emissions?
Right, so you're referring to the third generation of these nationally determined contributions, these countrywide plans, right? And first of all, this is the third iteration. The third iteration is better than the second. The second was better than the first. So most of these country plans now are the whole of the economy, all gases, and some of them are even sort of basically beginning to be recognizable investment plans, right? So that's good. Now, when you tally them all up, we're not on track for 1.5 degrees. We're not aligned with Paris. And so the question is, what do we need to do to help these countries implement them and go further? And what we're looking for at this World Leaders Summit, and you're hearing this in the dialogue amongst leaders, certainly I heard it today, is, okay, this is what we could do now, and we have to strive to do better. And actually, President Xi Jinping at the General Assembly in September suggested what the numbers would be for the Chinese nationally determined contribution and said, and we will strive to do better. So, now, in the Paris Agreement, we didn't say we would strive to do better. We said we would produce nationally determined contributions with the highest ambition, right? So we have to keep reminding ourselves, but given that countries are where they are, then the question is, how do you keep supporting them? And take Brazil's NDC. It's a range. It's 60% reduction in emissions up to 67% reduction in emissions. The difference between 60 and 67 is whether they get their regulatory frameworks in place, and mostly they have, and they've now got a new carbon market, etc., all these things that we should be very impressed by, and then they have to attract domestic and international investment into each of the sectors of their economy. And if they do that well, they can hit 67. If that falters, then it's going to be 60. And that's the kind of thing we're discussing at this COP. It's like, how do you make sure the investment is flowing into, a grid which is capable of absorbing more renewable energy? How do you make sure that you've got a flow of investment going into the agriculture sector so that the soils are protected and that the farmers are able to... So we're getting down now into the nitty-gritty of financial regulations, regulations of sectoral targets, and we're getting down into the nitty-gritty then of, and how do we find the money to make sure that we're all resilient, that people are resilient, that nature is resilient, and that infrastructure is resilient. Because if we don't get that right, the impacts of climate, which we're feeling earlier than we expected, are going to be the things that are on the front of newspapers, and those will be the impacts that people feel. So you add it all up, we're not on track. Not on track, got to do better.
So I'm going to give you a chance to brag a little bit, because I think the UK reduction target is the highest.
Yeah.
Would you like to explain a little bit about the UK?
So the new government, the Labour government, was elected in July 2024. Took the work that had been already underway and prepared by our civil service, but also in the UK, very importantly, we have a statutory obligation to meet net zero. This is enshrined in statute. We have independent statutory bodies that look at our carbon budget and tell the government whether they're on track or not on track. It's independent. It's not party political, and so we have parameters that we have to sort of manage within in order to get to our net zero commitment. And so you take all of that evidence and then you look at it as a government. You say, okay, well, we are going to, how do we manage this? And so we came out with a figure of 81% reduction of emissions over the baseline levels
By 2035.
By 2035, and that's definitely a stretch target, but doable. But this wasn't sort of, let's just throw a number to the UN. This was worked through in detail, and it depends upon the success of our energy transition, and from that, other things will flow. It is Paris aligned, so it is in line with getting to net zero by 2050. And we came early with it. We came early, so we announced it a year ago in Baku at COP29. One, because it's a new government, we wanted to sort of show the direction of travel. But two, was to put a marker out there for other countries and to help Brazil in particular, as the hosts of COP30, sort of pull things along. And I think it's had that effect.
I'm really interested. I've been deep at one point in my journalistic career, deep into the debate around nuclear power. Actually, I went deep into it with Oliver Stone. You know who I'm talking about?
The film director.
The film director.
Sounds like a movie.
Yeah, he did a movie. He did a movie about how nuclear power had been unfairly aligned. It was quite weird to hang out with Oliver Stone. The point is, I'm interested in how reliant the UK is on nuclear in its plans, and how you see the debate shifting on nuclear power, because it's been anathema to some countries, Germany in particular, but also Japan more recently after the Fukushima disaster about 13 years ago or whatever it was.
2011.
2011, exactly. I was there, actually.
Yeah.
I'm just really interested in where you think the debate is now on nuclear power in terms of renewables. And
so it's definitely shifting, right? And I think societies shift. Societies have innately within them a risk appetite. And it can shift, as Japan's did after Fukushima. And you can see it creeping back now, right? I mean, coal, nuclear. And you've seen that happen in other societies as well. Where we are at the moment, so the UK, nuclear will be a significant part of our energy security future. We've clarified that. We've got investment coming in, and we're investing, especially through Rolls-Royce and others, in a new generation of small modular reactors, in addition to the large nuclear plants that we have. So we've clarified that, and that's there. What I see when I travel around the world as the UK's envoy is that every country is interested in the next generation of nuclear technology, which people are very excited about, small modular reactors, etc. And they're excited about it because they believe that it would be an important part of the mix that they need, in particular to provide reliable, affordable power for data centers and the age of AI. Now, these are countries that have no nuclear past, so they have no civil nuclear power regulatory framework. They've got no laws, they've got no safety, they've got nothing, right? So all of that would have to be built, and then we'd also have to understand, in agreement with the International Atomic Energy Agency, how you would deal with this spread of nuclear civil power in the context of non-proliferation. So there's all kinds of things that have to happen. So when a billionaire or others stand up and tell you, you can have an SMR tomorrow in your backyard and you can
Oliver Stone.
Yeah, or you can run your data center off it. Not quite. But I think more and more countries are interested in nuclear. And I think nuclear as a clean power is definitely sort of in people's imagination. Of course, the joke always is, right, that, it's 20 years away. So it isn't a fast solution. So for those countries that want now reliable power because they want data centers and they don't want to miss out on the AI revolution, for them, really, it is a mixture of renewables and battery and storage that can get them the quickest, cheapest available power now. Yeah.
I don't think we could finish an interview without talking about perhaps the elephant in the room. The United States has withdrawn from the Paris Agreement again.
In the process of.
Or in the process of. You have Germany, France, the UK all cutting aid budgets. China is the world's biggest emitter. What do you think about the state of the sort of discussion? We're here at COP30, but the Americans are not showing up maybe in as big a way as they would have in the past. What does that mean for the future of this multilateral approach?
So it's one of those moments where two things can be true, right? So we've got emissions from fossil fuels going up, we've got more investment going into renewables. We're emerging out of a world that we've recognised for the last 80 years of institutions and liberal democracy and everything into a new world. There's a power shift moving, it's moving south and east. You've got China in a very, they don't like the word dominant, but dominant position in many of the supply chains of renewable energy. They are an electro-state, and the United States seems to want to just be content as a petro-state. The world is shifting, and so all of that is happening at the same time. When I travel around the world, many countries sort of ask me why the United States is shooting itself in its economic foot, and that's interesting to me. That's their question, because it's inescapable that the energy transition is A, underway, B, kind of past the tipping point, and C, is going to be the way in which we fuel our future. And clearly the process of electrification is where people start to feel the benefit of all the renewable energy and other forms of energy that are being installed. And that's where the growth is. I mean, in the UK, the green growth, the part of our economy that's green, is growing 3 times faster than the rest of the economy, and you can see that in country after country after country. Why the United States? I mean, I think it's one thing to withdraw, and of course the Paris Agreement was written in a way that it would allow countries to withdraw and rejoin, and the US has done that before. That's a political choice. But the economic choice for most Americans is going to be having access to affordable clean air, clean power, which gives you clean air, which gives you clean water. So I think this is a decision in this moment. Whether this is a long-term decision, whether they come back again at some point in the future, I don't know. But the idea that everything is sort of on hold because one country is withdrawing, I think the evidence here, the evidence in all of the economic press and in the financial press, and the evidence from the communities that will be coming up the river, the indigenous leaders that are coming to Belém over the next few days, is that that one country is the outrider, not the new sort of pivotal centre of this process.
You've said publicly that 1.5 degrees centigrade is still alive but not in good health. Do you think that we will see a change to that target at some point? Do you think that now people have said, okay, well, we're just not going to we don't think we're going to actually reach that at all. So now we've got to move to 2 degrees and adaptation or something. Do you think that the conversation will start to change?
So 1.5 is a scientific concept, right? It is the science that tells us that in order to be able to live with prosperity and with dignity, we need to stop warming at 1.5, right? This is not a politically derived figure. It was politically agreed after Paris. Paris was below 2, right? And then 1.5 came through a scientific report. And I think people are sort of misinterpreting the point of that target. So that is a scientific reality to which we are all committed to trying to get to. Whether we get there in one straight line, or whether we get there by going above and then coming below, or whether we overshoot and have to come back, these are all questions that will come from how much we invest now in curbing emissions and how much we invest in removing emissions from the atmosphere. What the trajectory is to 1.5 is what's at debate, but 1.5 is the scientific target. I think the other thing to note is that every continent, every country is now experiencing the impacts of climate change more profoundly than people thought we would at this juncture in 2025. Some of what countries are going through now was projected for the late 2030s, early 2040s. And we're getting to the point where we've gone past tipping points, natural tipping points. And at that point, we don't quite know how things will go. And so the danger is it's like, okay, well, 1.5, we're going to miss it. So, let's just do other things and let's just sort of hunker down, and we'll be all right. This is a profound misunderstanding of what is going on in communities around the world and in countries around the world. And every life is equal. We, the peoples in the United Nations. So we can't, the biggest mistake I think you can make as a climate activist, or as anybody who's following this, or even somebody just sitting at home watching, is to think that it's just a number. The difference between 1.5 and 2 is the disappearance of certain cultures, the opportunity for certain communities, the existence and the health and well-being of a generation of children. This isn't just a number. I was schooled on this before Paris. I was sitting there as a World Bank employee, and I was like, with my spreadsheets, and what's this going to cost, and what's that going to cost, and I got lost in it. And I was sat down by one indigenous leader and another leader, a lawyer for least developed countries, and they said, Rachel, you've got to just come back down, take a breath. These are people's lives, people's livelihoods, and the entire dependence of certain cultures and the ability for them to exist. It's not just a number. So it's a scientific fact, it is a target, it is a political process, but it's people's lives.
I think very well said. There's been a lot of talk, and there's a lot of discussion around Brazil's tropical forest forever facility. Yeah. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what that is and what we can expect and why the UK didn't put any money into it
yet. So I think the UK is looking at investing in the TFFF. Weren't able to do it now. In conversations internally and then with other partners about what the future might hold. But what's happened over the last 2 days is that we've got a commitment of north of like 6 billion. I mean, I don't know what the considerable amount that the Germans announced today that they would put a considerable amount in, and because their Germany considerable is considerable. So I don't know, let's say that that's $1 billion just for rounding up purposes. So we're probably at about $6.5–7 billion committed into a fund. And this is what's different about it. This is not aid. This is not a donation. This is not a grant. This is not a bucket that's being passed around. This is an investment in a fund which will have... How
does it work? What does it mean?
So it's to investment banks, to other kinds of funds, to all kinds of entities.
Pension funds.
Yeah, so private money, basically. And that private money will get a commercial return. So the fund will then invest in the markets, and the proceeds of what the markets, how the market
Public
fund,
markets, equities, stock
yeah,
market.
it's just going to invest
bonds,
across the world,
stocks, whatever,
global,
yeah.
right?
Okay.
So the revenues from that will then get sent to forest countries in tropical zones, where the governments are able to guarantee that they will meet certain levels of integrity in the management of their forests, and 20% of the proceeds will go directly to indigenous peoples and local communities. So two things. One, if this works, this could work for other sort of public goods. It could work for oceans and seagrasses and other things. Two, it is perpetual, it is sustainable, because the fund keeps investing, the fund keeps producing a return, the returns keep going to the countries.
And it's run by professional.
And it will be run by professional
managers.
fund managers. And it's backstopped by the World Bank Group, which is a AAA multilateral development bank. So what we're doing is breaking through the idea that this is nice to have and that we just need to give handouts.
And it's charity.
Yeah, this is need to have. We need these forests to be preserved, and finding ways to capture all of the private capital that needs a return but would love to be involved in saving the forest, because that's your food basket, that's your price of a cup of coffee, that's your watershed, that's your food security. This brings it all together. So we've spent a lot of time the last 2 years, lots of technical assistance, lots of helping the Brazilians talk to the markets, using London and the City of London as a place to have this conversation. So we're deeply committed to this fund working. The timing was kind of awkward with our own budget this year.
Yeah, your budget is a bit awkward. That's true.
But the other thing that's important about this is that investing in this fund, in that junior tranche, is Indonesia, is Brazil, and maybe China. And that's important because...
And Germany, considerably.
Yes, and Germany and Norway. But the point being, it's not just the developed countries, right? So it's middle-income countries as well. And inside the COP, we always, it's always, the rich countries have to transfer funds down to other countries. This breaks that model a little bit.
Which I think is a very good thing.
Yeah.
So you have been in negotiations, though, right? Yeah. You're not the lead negotiator anymore, but you've been a negotiator. So what is it like inside those rooms? What's the sort of mood? What do you think? What do we expect next week? Does it ever get heated? Do people throw things and yell at each other? Does it get very, very tense? What's it like? Just tell us a little bit about it.
All of the above.
Yeah.
The first week is technical processes of looking at all of the things that have happened in the year up to that point, receiving reports, registering them, approving them, and also there's always, in recent years we've had a fight over the actual agenda. What are we actually going to talk about? And then you have a sort of middle weekend where the presidency starts to take over. So in the first week, these are technical bodies. Then the presidency starts to take over, and then the presidency exerts its influence on the process. And in the second week, you then start negotiating on what are we agreeing, what are we, what's new that needs to be agreed, what language are we going to use to sort of describe everything that has happened. And this is a place where you can start referencing the things that are happening outside the negotiations, so the TFFF and all these other things. And that would be then the document that comes out of the COP, sort of the political chapeau, the political hat over all of these other technical things. And it can get very intense. And you've
personal
got
people start getting nasty.
Occasionally you get seasoned. There are seasoned negotiators. There are people who've negotiated for the last 30 years, and then you've got obviously new people tracking through. It's very difficult for small island states and least developed countries. They have, negotiations are going on in multiple rooms at the same time. How if you're a country where your finance ministry has like 4 officials, how do you cope with that, right? So. It's so, and it goes, and we've got this bad habit in recent years of going over time. Yeah. And so last year in Baku, I think my minister had like 6-7 hours sleep in 40 hours. So I wouldn't recommend it as part of a health regime. And sometimes we're arguing over colons and semi-sentences and things like that. But actually, at the heart of it, what we're really doing is arguing about the quality of partnership between countries to get this done. And so the issues that are the most difficult are the issues of the means of implementation. And that comes normally down to finance in the last few years.
Who's going to pay?
Who's going to pay and how?
And how?
Yeah. And then I think also...
And how much?
Yeah, and then 2 years ago in Dubai, for the first time, famously, we referenced that fossil fuels had something to do with this. And we agreed language that said that we would transition away from fossil fuels. One of the things to look for here is whether or not we will agree how to actually transition away. Because if you're Angola, your transition away is going to be different from Nigeria, is going to be different from the UK, is going to be different from... And we didn't say anything about the how. We just sort of said, you have to transition away. And there's a call from a number of countries to really sort of put some not parameters, but some sort of guardrails around that, right? I was just in the Energy Leaders Summit now, and it was very interesting to listen to Guyana, Suriname, Namibia, countries that have just recently found huge oil fields and gas fields, right? And so they're like, look, how are we going to manage our transition? How are you going to help us manage our transition? Are you going to say that we can't exploit any of this? So these are complicated questions. And then, of course, you've got the fact that within the G7, we haven't made the progress that we thought we'd make 10 years ago in transitioning away ourselves, right? Partly that was to do with energy security after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Of course, in the UK, that's driven us even harder into a renewable energy direction, but not all countries have done the same. So I think you'll see a conversation here about what kind of process do we have about how to manage that transition away.
Rachel Kite, thank you so much. Really interesting and really, really... So now we have a little treat. There was a very meaningful agreement signed just today, and to tell us more about it, we've got Jörg Eigendorf, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer from Deutsche Bank, and we have Kevin Conrad, who is Executive Director of the Coalition of the Rainforest Nations. So they're going to come up and tell you a bit about this agreement. Jörg, stand in the middle, or sit on the chairs, because then you'll be on TV.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Now I even have to share my microphone with you. Okay.
No, that's yours.
We share.
Perfect. You have your own. Please.
So why don't
tell us?
I can happy to start. So eventually we ask ourselves how. I mean, if you really look at it, we are in the year 2025, and we have no solutions to integrate the protection of the rainforest into the market economy. And we all know that we don't integrate the externalities of doing business accurately, and we will need to find mechanisms that the economies, the businesses pay for the pollution on the one side. On the other side, we have this treasure of rainforest all over the world, which we need to protect. And if you look today, and this was when we started this journey 1 year ago, when we look at it today, you can really say that we have all ingredients at place. We have nations like Honduras and Suriname, and I welcome here Luque Medina, the environmental minister of Honduras, Honduras. And we have the market, we have the process, Paris Agreement, and we have companies willing to invest into carbon credits. And this is why we started. And so we are now there, that we are ready in the sense that we negotiate and develop with Suriname and Honduras together, and with the partner Coalition for Rainforest Nations. We want to make use of the Paris Agreement under Article 5.2 and 6.2 to channel private investments into the protection of rainforests. We are not there yet. We have started a year ago. There's a lot of work to do. We need to look very closely at the safeguards. 5.2 which sets a framework, and 6.2, which is factory accounting mechanism, they leave a lot of room, and we need to fill this room in a way, and there are a lot of standards which we can make use of, and to need to do it in a best practice way, but eventually to come up with a rainforest carbon credit that can become an asset class. This is our ultimate goal. And we started this journey. We have now the 2 countries we are working with in a very focused manner. We have an incredible capacity on the ground. And we think we have the network to create, and we have the buyers that, like Bayer AG, like Siemens, Symrise, and others who are very interested, who are willing to invest in this and give the credibility into this effort. And that's where we are.
Very, very good. Very good. Would you like to talk a little bit about it, how it came about, and what it means?
About 20 years ago, it was obvious to us at that point that reversing global deforestation had to be a priority if we're going to meet our goals. The trouble with the Paris Agreement in 192 countries, well, one of them, there are some others, but is that 192 countries have to agree to something. So when you set up rule sets, it takes time, and they're not always perfect because they're negotiated, and there are different groups, the Arab group and the major emitters, and everyone is in there trying to make sure that they see in this agreement something that they need to see. While all that's been going on, there's a large group of developing countries that have actually reduced emissions with the speed and scale that the Paris Agreement dreams about. And largely, those are the countries that have rainforests. They've reduced over 12 billion tons of emission reductions that have been verified under the Paris Agreement, while everybody else keeps talking about renewable energy and transitioning. They've done it. But they've done it without any financial support. These countries have done, these are some of the poorest countries in the world. First time the private sector has said, we want to be part of powering the Paris Agreement. We want to make the Paris Agreement achieve its goals. We want to use the agreement, and we want to deliver finance to those governments and communities that are stewards of these forest assets. And this is a transition, and I have to commend Jorg and Deutsche Bank for understanding that we're overdue for a step change. And this step change has to take shape in the way we distribute finance, in the way we work with developing countries, and the way we leverage carbon markets. And all of those things we're working on together. And I want to introduce Minister Luki. Luki has been doing all of the work, and he's going to replace me now on the chair.
So Lucky Medina is the Minister of Environment for Honduras. Please.
Thank you, and I appreciate. So we are so happy right now because we check the newspaper and all the media channels and radio stations, and all Honduras is talking about this great news for the signing tomorrow early, and how the President Xiomara Castro give the start of writing a new chapter of the history of the country, and a new chapter of the history and how to implementate the Paris Agreement and the Red Plus mechanism with the unconditional help of the Coalition for Rainforest Nations and the Trust, Dutch Bank, and the trust too from Bayer and Siemens and Symrise. It's all a new team building the justice, the climate justice, and more equal conditions for people who defend their natural resources and the rainforest. So thanks for looking for our countries and to help to develop a new reality.
Yeah, and thank you, Minister. And if you may add to this, we've been on the ground in both countries, and it has been an incredible experience to see. These are both very different countries. Honduras has a budget of a little bit more than 10 billion US dollars in US dollars, if you calculate in US dollars, compared to 1.3 billion in Suriname. Honduras has 6 million hectares of rainforest with 2,000 soldiers protecting it. Suriname has 15 million hectares of rainforest with barely a little bit more than 100 armed forces protecting it. And the same, and you really see that a country which has to take care of education, has to take care of health, has to take care of debt service, we leave then these countries with these huge treasures more or less alone. And I have to say that I see there's room for always, like we have these national allowances systems, EU ETS, super helpful, very, very important that we keep those. Then you have the voluntary market. I also think, and Kevin and I argue about this a lot, I think there's room and there needs to be a lot of capital into these markets too. And then it's us, we are a little bit the hybrid in the middle then, with focusing on the Paris Agreement, UNFCCC, and on the governments, because we can now talk forever about, and I remember one sentences of when we had a lot of policymakers we were talking with, and one policymaker said, it's true that the rainforest is a problem when it comes to carbon markets. I mean, if you just think about that sentence, the rainforest, yeah, then cut it down and plant new trees and you don't have that problem anymore. I mean, this cannot be the answer. The answer must be, this is the most effective way on earth. There's hardly anything more effective than rainforest. And if you fly across Honduras, and I'm really grateful to the minister that he has taken us on the flight and showed us the northeast of Honduras. Of a 3-hour flight, you see maybe 20 to 30 minutes real rainforest, primary rainforest without human traces. And you see where mankind comes, where little streets, and so that's the end of the primary rainforest. And you understand how difficult it will be to protect it. And by the way, I don't think it's a question of poverty. The richer economies get, usually the less they have to do with nature and the more greedy they get. So I don't think really it's as that question. I think it's more or less the question is, do we empower the governments to protect it, and do we allow them to monetize the protection of the rainforest? And that would make it so much easier to protect it. And I can't understand all these debates, and we had just Rachel Kite here. We are talking and talking and talking, and I learned one thing in 10 years in Deutsche Bank. And I was the one responsible for introducing CO2 as a steering mechanism. You need to start walking if you want to come across the finish line. In theory, you will never make it to the finish line. And effectively, I have sometimes the feeling the world is just in theory thinking this is removal avoidance, and we need to think about this and that, and is this really additional, and is this not additional, and we are theoretizing permanently and losing precious time. And when I was on the ground, when we were on the ground, I can only say, seeing the investment this government has done into rainforest protection, because they expect also that they get the fruits back. And I think this needs to be made possible, and we need to support them in this. If we don't do it, it would mean that we leave these countries with a treasure to humanity alone, and we just leave, okay, you take care of it, and that would mean the death verdict for the rainforest. And we have not much more time to go.
Well, thank you. Thank you both so much. Thank you, Minister. Thank you for coming, and thank you, Jorg. Great to see you. And I'd just like to once more thank Bayer, and thank you for having us here in Casa Bayer, and look forward to spending the next few days and seeing what happens at this COP30. So thank you to Kevin as well, and to Bill Anderson, and see you soon.